talk will be by Jenny Kingsley. She's a third-year medical student at UT Health in Houston, Texas. She's served as an officer for students involved in Global Health in Texas, or SITE, the logistics coordinator for Strings Attached, and she's also a member of the leadership team of the Global Health curriculum at UTH. She's interested in creating long-term, responsible healthcare opportunities both at home and abroad. And today she'll be discussing establishing responsible healthcare in the resource-limited setting on behalf of UTH Strings Attached.
Hey guys, my name's Jenny Kingsley, and I'm here to talk to you guys about Strings Attached, establishing responsible healthcare in low-resource settings in Kenya. It's a project that's near and dear to my heart, so I'm really excited to be able to be here and talk to you guys about it. So, today I want to talk to you guys about how Strings Attached came to be, our goals of what we wanted to accomplish as a group, what we did in Kenya, what we found in Kenya, and then the things that we learned there. So, first off, there are approximately 2 million orphans in Kenya, and there's no real infrastructure or policy to take care of them. There's no health care, there's no feeding protocols, there's really no government-sponsored homes. So as such, the care of orphans are really organized within the community, primarily by lay people, and there's really no overarching organization to make sure that these orphans are receiving care. Flying Kites is orphanage that works out of Kenya that's primarily sponsored by Westerners, and they have provided loving homes and sponsor locally organized homes through Western volunteerism. And they found that they could provide loving homes for approximately 500 orphans across the state of Kenya. However, they noticed that their health care was severely lacking, and that's when UT Houston came into play. One of the volunteers there was best friends with a fourth year at UT Houston, and she decided to try to bridge the gap by bringing UT Houston students to Kenya. So we formed a team of 3 fourth years, 3 first going on second years, and then 1 faculty mentor, with the idea that we would have 2 teams of students going twice a year to Kenya to provide care. What we wanted to really accomplish was focusing on sustainable preventative healthcare measures. So while there is value in bringing antifungals, antiparasitics to these kids at an acute one-time intervention, that was not what we were looking for. We were trying to establish long-term care at these sites, specifically focusing on sanitation and hygiene, which we chose to address through water quality, which I'll talk to you guys about in a little bit. We also wanted to establish baseline care and medical records for the kids that we were going to be responsible for, with the idea that we would be able to set up longitudinal data tracks to assess how effective we were being. So I wanted to talk to you guys first and foremost about what we did while we were there, besides having fun, which I hope you can tell. We went to 3 different locations in Kenya and saw about 120 kids. The first one being Flying Kites, which is the flagship location of Flying Kites, the organization. It's in the foothills of Kenya in a little town called Jabini, and it houses about 27 kids. Overall, this was the most well-stocked orphanage that we worked at. It had a lot of fairgrounds, and it had its own water supply, which was actually huge. Next, we went to Good Samaritan, which was in a slum called Soweto in Nairobi. It houses about 51 children. The major issues that we saw here were, 1, water access again. They did not have any city water. There was no running water, so they had to walk quite a bit of ways away from where they lived to get water. Also, all 51 children were housed in a 1 2-bedroom apartment, so overcrowding was a major issue here too. Jinrasi was the last place we went. Also in Nairobi, in a slum called Sinai, which is one of the largest slums in Nairobi, and it houses 45 children. This is probably the poorest location that we were at. You can see that the home is made of this corrugated tin metal, and it was dirt floor, so it was extremely susceptible to weather conditions. And then it also was extremely small, with 3 small bedrooms that doubled as bedrooms and schooling for all the kids. So at each location, we had a set routine of what we did. The first thing was intake. We got height and weight measurements of all the kids. Then we also sort of took a general intake of their appearance and what their clothing inventory was. We did dental screenings. Two of our students received training at the dental school here by Dr. Fleitz, one of the former deans of the dental school, to identify dental caries and abscesses in the kid's mouth. And so we were able to stratify them for risk assessment in terms of the impact of dental caries that would have on them. We also provided fluoride treatment for each of the kids and brought extras to give to the kids, their caregivers, to make sure that they could continue getting fluoride treatments. We did well child checks, which most of the kids had never had before, so they really loved it. And we did vision and hearing screening, just like you would do in the States. So what did we find? What did we go over? Major findings included fungal infections. You can see this little girl. She had a pretty severe tinea capitis infection. We also found evidence of parasitic infections. The worm burdens in these kids was so high you could see worms peristalting in their stomach as you did an abdominal exam. We found quite a bit of underweight, although not as much as I was expecting considering the summer that we were there was the summer of the crisis with Sudan in the northern border of Kenya. There was a severe famine that summer. And then also tons of dental caries. So to address these things, like I said, we weren't there necessarily with the intention of providing acute one-off interventions. We knew that we didn't have the sustainability because we weren't a large project, so we focused on grassroots, what were the baseline things that we needed to establish, as this was our first visit to Kenya. So the first thing we did was make medical records. You can see the stack of them. We had brought a Polaroid camera with us, so each medical record had a picture of the kid, right there. It had their well child check exam with any notable findings. It had a growth curve chart in it, and it also had a dental diagram where the people in charge of the dental program documented any major findings that they found. Next, we decided to try to address water quality. This is a base issue for a lot of health measures, right? You use water to wash, you drink water. Water pretty much is a major issue on day-to-day life, especially when you don't have access to running water daily. So what we did is we went to each location and collected water where they collected water. So that's me getting water. And then one of our team members actually took coliform plates and plated the water on these plates. I don't know if you can appreciate it, but he measured how much the water sources grew E. coli. So these both are from Soweto, the second place that we visited. This water is drill water and is absolutely clean. This water is underground water that they were using to cook with, and I don't know if you can see, but grew literally hundreds of E. coli colonies. He did this, just as a side note, and he wrote a paper about it. He incubated them for 24 hours by taping the plates to the inside of his thigh because we didn't have access to an incubator. So talk about a low resource right there. We were able to use the data that we found from this and help inform each children's home about where they should be getting their water. So that was the stepping off point for a lot of the interventions that we had subsequently. So from that, we did hand washing. We tried to make all of these interventions as kid-friendly as possible. So we got this fluorescent powder that you put on your hands. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it, but we sprinkled it on each of the kids' hands, and then we let them play, go crazy for 10 minutes. And then they didn't have lights, they didn't have electricity, so it was really easy. We had a portable black light that we had brought with us from the States, and we shined it all over all of the surfaces and showed the transfer of the powder from their hands to all the different parts of the room, and even onto each other. So the idea is to mimic the spread of germs and bacteria, a concept that they had never really been introduced to before. So this is a really tangible way of trying to teach them how important it is to have clean hands. So then So then we moved on to teaching them how to wash their hands and giving them the resources to do so. So like I said, not a lot of them have access to running water. So we created these hand washing stations. This is all researched beforehand, guessing that running water was going to be an issue. So these are locally available resources. This is like a little jug type thing on string, and we literally just hung it, and it's a pulley mechanism where she pulls on this string, it tips the jug over, and water comes down into your hands. We also had, you can't see in these pictures, but there are strings with soap attached so that the kids could wash their hands with basins underneath to collect the water. And then in Jabini, I mentioned that they did have their own water source, so we just taught them how to wash water there. We ended up setting up, I think, 6 different hand washing stations across the 3 different sites. The next thing we taught, the last major intervention, was toothbrushing. So again, in an effort to make this super interactive, we got these pink pills that you eat, and they attach to plaque on your teeth. And so we had all the kids eat the pills, and then we taught them how to toothbrush. This is probably the least sustainable part of our program because we brought the toothbrushes from the United States. They had been donated to us. But we taught them how to make their own toothpaste, primarily baking soda and salt, also a recipe provided by Dr. Fleitz from the dental school here, and taught them how to brush their teeth. We gave all of the kids their own toothbrush, and then all the mothers of the homes, the caregivers of the homes, we gave them extras in case long-term planning. So that's sort of what we did. And then I wanted to spend the last couple minutes of my talk talking about things that we learned. So one of the major barriers was language. We thought that English was the major language spoken in Kenya, not taking into account education levels. We didn't realize that Kiswahili and local dialects like that are actually more commonly spoken. In addition to that, the kids themselves are more likely to speak Kiswahili than English. So we were able to communicate with their caregivers quite well, but not the children themselves. And one of the initial things that we wanted to address was assessing psychosocial health of the kids. And we found that we actually weren't able to do that because even though we had a validated screening test, the kids didn't have the emotional language capabilities in English to describe to us the problems that they were having. We also found that transportation is an issue. I'm sure it's an issue in almost every international trip. If we were in the city, we were stuck in traffic, and if we were in the country, we were stuck in a non-moving, non-working van. So both of those were a major contribution to feelings of burnout and frustration. We were there working for nearly 4 weeks and had a 2-week training and planning session before we left. So we found each other getting quite short with each other. And to try to alleviate that, we ended up building a little safari into our trip at the midway point. So you can see a picture of our giraffe, which I think actually helped a lot going towards the morale of our trip. The big 2 things that I want to talk about, though, avoiding non-sustainable interventions. We didn't come in with the plan of deworming the kids or providing antifungal medications because we didn't necessarily think that they were long-term sustainable issues for us and with our budget. And I felt almost a moral obligation. I had $20 in my pocket that I could go down the street and buy these kids medicines, but we didn't do that. Instead, we were actually able to find local WHO pharmacies that provide these deworming medicines for most children for free. It was just a matter of getting the caregivers plugged into the network so that they could find local access to those, which turns out to be, a much more sustainable project. And then the last thing is that we paired with a local organization, which was huge in our success in implementing our project throughout the week. So, you guys probably all know this, but pairing with a local organization ensures that the interventions that we want to offer are actually needed in the community. Before we left, it gave us a jumping off point to have someone to ask questions about what did they actually need, what are actually problems, rather than going in with our own biases. It also helped us understand local traditions and customs. Something that I had not been anticipating is that actually how important it was to meet with local healthcare leaders and local political leaders throughout our trip at each location so that they felt like they were being brought into the fold. It was often emphasized that we needed to meet to have an exchange of ideas, which really facilitated our time there. Also, pairing with a local organization gives you access to local resources, facilitates the teaching of community members, and facilitates sustainability, because even though we were planning to come and go, Flying Kites is there sort of forever. And so it lessens our burden of keeping our visibility up because Flying Kites is always there. So I don't have a slide on this, but just moving forward, we went to Kenya in the summer of 2011. Which, like I said, was the summer with a lot of turmoil with Sudan, and actually haven't been able to return because Kenya was placed on the state travel advisory list that summer, and because we're a public institution, we're not allowed to return. So unfortunately, I think we had a great baseline for collecting long-term data, but we haven't been able to return yet. So our hopes are to get that cleared up in the near future. There's still a lot of initial members of this initial trip around in Houston wanting to go back, and so that's sort of our plan looking out. Do you have any questions for me? Sure.
Did y'all get a chance to address to address the E. coli contamination in the groundwater? Where are these?
Sure. So a lot of the access to water is a public access, so it's not in their own homes. So they're traveling to off-site locations and bringing the water back. So we actually had very little control over the environment that water was being brought out of and out of. Does that make sense? So rather than trying to, that would be ideal, but rather than trying to fix the water contamination problem, the best that we could think to do was just to advise people to stay away from that water source. Does that answer your question? Anything else? Sure.
It's interesting that you mentioned the travel advisory, because there's a group of students that UT ties with
Mm-hmm.
how they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But they are from the opinion, I think that what makes this conference so wonderful, because maybe where one school and one student, it's not feasible, but if you still needed information, even just to follow up on how the kids
Mm-hmm.
making contacts with other institutions when they are traveling abroad. So this group of UT Tyler students, they're going with professors in health and human performance.
Mhm.
So you just kind of wanted to send a message to
Sure,
them,
sure, yeah.
that could be a place where if they were, somehow maybe you could incorporate something that you need into their itineraries. So
Mhm.
they can bring you information back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, I don't know how they're able to go and they're
Yeah, I need to talk to them.
it's UT.
Yeah.
It's cool. So I think just being aware of it and being able to reach out across institutions.
Absolutely. Sure. Thank you. Anything else? All right. Thanks, guys.